Good day to you, and thank you for joining us on the first episode of Africa Amara, an African but by all means Australian TV show. This show was set up to represent Africa and the African people, more especially those that have made Australia home. We will do this by uncovering and sharing constructive features that coexist between our two continents and the noble untold stories of Africa. Amara, which means urgent business, is derived from Swahili, which is a dominant dialect over a number of countries in Africa. My name is Oji Ntwagai, and I come from Botswana, which is in the southern part of Africa. I have been in Australia for a total of 5 years, and likewise, many fellow Africans here, I consider it my home away from home. With me today is Hetty Goldberg. Hetty has lived in a few places in Africa and now resides here. She will be sharing her knowledge of the business relations that bind our two continents. On the first episode of Amara, we will uncover the representation of Africa in Western media. For the time I have been in Australia, I have realized that the stories about Africa are often of the extreme, portraying it as a hostile continent overflowing with all sorts of mishap. To know what Australians understand about Africa, we interviewed a few locals on their perception, and this is what they had to say. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think Africa?
Big, wild, and poor.
What I know about Africa is that there's a big violence by the people, so the law is not really nice to the people.
At the moment, probably the drought and food crisis.
Heat and poverty and unsafe drinking water.
The poverty and the kids that don't get any food and the families that can't survive because there's no fresh water or anything and they're dying of AIDS, pretty much.
Starvation.
Yeah.
When I think of Africa, I think of all the wild animals out in the wild. I think of Victoria Falls. Well, if I were to be totally honest, when I was a child back in Ireland, my father always talked about the hunger in Africa and the hungry children.
Most of the media tends to be about what's the problems down there. I don't think you really hear about the hard-working people who are making a difference down there. Part of the world that's working very hard to improve their lot in life. And I just think that they will achieve it. I hope they achieve it very soon.
Africa is a vast continent consisting of 54 nations. And yes, welcome to South Sudan, the world's newest country, having gained independence on the 9th of July this year. However, there is often a homologous interpretation which overshadows this multi-state makeup. With more than 35 countries existing in harmony and having functional societies, the tribulations of a few have tinted the image of a continent as a whole. So how will Africa revive itself from this pessimistic outlook? And today in studio, we have Dr. Berhan Ahmed from the African think tank. Dr. Ahmed, please tell us a bit about the African think tank.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And African Think Tank is an organization established with the challenges facing our communities. As an Africans, the history of Africa perceived in this country in a very colonial mind. An African think tank has been advocating on issues facing Africans in the settlement process in 21st century Australia.
Can you just tell us a bit about your struggle in getting a rightful image for the African people in Australia?
Africa is now the giant waking with everything. And this information is not available in this country. What we're trying to bridge is, it's not that our color says something. No, our history says more than our color says. And we have had a long journey to come to this country with determination in adding value to the multicultural systems. The media is always speaking on some of the incidents of individuals that should not be seen as a level of a continent. And what we're trying to advocate is media and the broad Australian society should not look Africa with a very narrow mirror of a colonial history. And the biggest challenge is our kids at school. They lost the self-esteem. Why would they be blacks? That becomes a question to them, because when the history and the curriculum is trying to tell them that they're bad from a bad background, that destroys their self-esteem in among their peers. So what we're trying to put is, and this is it is not only an African sort of question, this is a role of Australian mainstream leadership to bring the right picture of Africa into the context of the whole debate, rather than just picking one end of the stick.
Do you think it's a strategy to satisfy this Western audience that is already used to and perhaps hungry for the bad news from Africa?
That has been one driving factor. But, I mean, we are in a 21st century. The world, we can see it in different ways. We've got access to information. And the media should encourage people to that. But also, the leadership is failing us because education, where our kids are going, is a channel to bring future leadership of inclusiveness. If this inclusiveness is to be formulated, has to be formulated at an early stage. So if we are going to talk about multiculturalism, it is not about what we say about multiculturalism. It's how we do it, how we nurture future leadership in inclusiveness. Now, Africans are becoming visible. It's not visible because their number is big. No, because of our color. And that, as I've always been saying, Australia has forgotten the black skin because they left them in the rural society, Aborigines. And now we brought the real history of blackness into the cities. And this created new challenge for Australian major capital cities, which they thought there's no blackness in that sort of system. No, we brought that question back to the debate. And this is where we, as Africans, we should be proud, and Australia should be proud to that, because we can be the bonding for a better future harmony of the indigenous Australians.
The media report that came out in 2009, has there been a difference? And after that was released, what's the difference between before and after that?
Well, look, that has been effective in our sort of process of helping Africans, but there's a long way to go. Because, as I said, the black history in Australia has had a very negative sort of connotation in the whole process. For us now, to bring that all in a real 21st debate with a generation that has come from thinking that this is Australia with a new dress, it is hard to change that dress overnight. So the challenge is looking for a national leadership to look at the beauty that this dynamics will bring is, in fact, our indigenous people will be a big stakeholders in the big debate, and they deserve. It is not a charity that we would offer them. No, this is the obligation of this society to do that. And we are bringing that debate, and that should be welcomed rather than be a scare of the whole issue.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for your contribution to our first episode of Africa Amara. And please stay tuned. Next up, we have Heidi Goldberg, who's going to be sharing a bit about the African restaurant business within Victoria and Melbourne. Stay tuned.